Big announcements from the Pittsburgh Steelers on Wednesday involving three players going to injured reserve, Joe Haden making an announcement himself, and some interesting signings to the practice squad as well as players returning to the roster. I'm Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We've got a lot to talk about heading into this Thursday about what the Steelers are doing as they finish off their week before they get into week one, getting ready for the Buffalo Bills. All that and more right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Today's episode is brought to you by Run Your Pool. Check them out today and get $10 off at runyourpool.lockedon or use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. Against the Locked On Steelers podcast, let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. It is Thursday. We are into September. It's September 2nd, and the Steelers made some moves that kind of made sense of what was really going on here. So, when we were talking about the roster cuts yesterday with Dean and Josh, by the way, I encourage you to go back and look through. That was a fun episode. There were certain questions like, wait a minute, I thought BJ Finney and Rashad Coward were doing well enough to make it on the team. I thought they needed an Arthur Maulet to help in the slot. What's really going on here? Well, then things made sense after things played out on Wednesday. The Steelers got to see Stephon Tuitt, Zach Banner, Anthony McFarland, all of them headed to injured reserve. Now, not in the sense that I get the sense that season ending, more so of the 3-week variety. So they'll miss week 1, probably week 2, maybe we'll see them week 3. But they wanted to get another day to evaluate these guys. And by letting go Arthur Maulet, BJ Finney, Rashad Coward, no one was going to work to claim those guys on waivers and give up their roster spots for them. So that was their way of kind of stashing them, giving these guys an extra to figure out if they can play week 1. But it is now official. Stephon Tuitt especially out. Zach Banner still recovering from his ACL. We understand that. And it's been a process for him to get back. He's played and had some good moments, but they want to make sure that he's 100% healthy. Remember, Zach Banner is a big guy. You know, it takes a little bit longer for big guys, and he's like 6'9", and it's gonna take a little bit longer for him to be back at 100%. And you kind of want him at 100%. But that explains why we got reports of Dan Moore moving back to left tackle, Chukwuma for moving back to right tackle, and some answers to at least temporary questions there. It also answers why the Steelers only had 4 cornerbacks on their roster, with Arthur Maulet not being there. Now they have 5, and 2 slot options with Cameron Sutton and Arthur Maulet, and 4 outside options with Joe Haden, Cam Sutton, Justin Lane, and James Pierre. Of course, not in that order, but that makes a bit of sense. Now with Tuitt, that's probably the most tricky thing here. Now, Anthony McFarland, he hasn't been able to practice, I guess, so they're giving him some time. But again, that's why I think they initially kept running backs. They weren't sure if he would survive the waiver wire, kind of like how Quincy Roche got claimed off by the Giants in less than 24 hours. But for Stephon Tuitt, this is the most delicate situation. Now, the Steelers, when asked about it, and Keith Butler even spoke about it at practice on Wednesday, saying that part of this, it's not just about an injury. Now, it was reported he has a quote-unquote minor knee injury that's been nagging him, but it's also that he's been overweight because, again, as I've said on this podcast for several months now, he's still dealing with the loss of his brother, as is his family, and it was a gruesome loss, and his mother saw it with an accident, and it's just one of those things that you can never gauge how anyone should respond to that. And no one should ever be gauged on how they should respond to losing their brother in a situation like that. And in any situation, really. I mean, I have a sister. I can't tell you how I would be able to function if I ever got the news that I lost her. I couldn't do the show. I couldn't do that. I can't imagine, having to report to a facility and get working out and training and practicing and performing to be one of the best interior pass rushers in the world when it came to this game. there's just way too many more important things that Stephon Tuitt needs to be taken care of. That's what the Steelers are giving him more time to do, and he'll get as much time as he needs. But I think for the on-field standpoint, defensive line may be the one position the Steelers have the most support at to give someone time to recover from something. You still got Cam Hayward as your star and as your leader and as your soul of the defense. You still got Tyson Olulu. You still got, Chris Wormley as a vet, and you've also seen Isaiah Buggs, Henry Mondo, and Carlos Davis all come on pretty strong there with this year. So and that also makes sense why they kept 8 defensive linemen, because one of them, Stephon Tuitt, wasn't going to be ready, or if he was, then maybe we would have seen a Carlos Davis or a Henry Mondo kind of tossed off the roster and sent to the practice squad. In that situation, we'll get to the practice squad signings later, but yeah, that's the situation here. It's just they want to give Stephon Tuitt all the time in the world, and the Steelers are a classy organization. They're going to give him time to figure it out. Thoughts and prayers to him and his family. He's needed to, he's been dealing with this, that's a major concern there. We'll see how serious the knee situation is for Stephon Tuitt. We know he's been banged up in his career. Last year was one of the few years where he's been pretty healthy. Was pretty healthy, with throughout everything. So that's kind of a situation where it's like, man, like you were hoping to build momentum on that. But again, first things first, let that man take care of himself, let him take care of his family. Then we'll see about football. And who knows, maybe he's closer to being ready than people think. But this way, the Steelers, he has 3 more weeks at least to prepare, to kind of get back to where they want him to be. And the Steelers, again, they've got the roster spots, they've got the defensive linemen to kind of deal with the situation. So yeah, there's certainly that to keep track of. But also, again, BJ Finney, Rashad Coward, and Arthur Marlette, all guys that I was like, wow, when they didn't make the roster, I'm like, geez, Arthur Marlette must be really hurt. BJ Finney, Rashad Coward, they were taking a whole bunch of reps in practice. But seeing those guys, Rashad Coward, he's been kind of the first guard off the bench, and that's kind of, I felt like he had kind of earned that. BJ Finney, depth at center and guard there. With JC Hassenauer, maybe this meant that he was, they believed him a little bit more. Now we're starting to see like, okay, they probably did, but they still want a couple guys on the inside to help out with depth behind Kendrick Green at center, Kevin Dotson at guard, and Trey Turner at guard. So all those things being considered. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, big Joe Haden news that he broke out first by his agent and then kind of on his own yesterday about what his plans are for the future. We'll talk about that in just a second here. But first, I got to tell you guys about Run Your Pool. Football season is back. Let's make the most of it with a better way to create your custom pool at runyourpool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. Run Your Pool makes it ridiculously easy to run a football pool with friends, family, or office mates. They offer dozens of formats, including Survivor, Pick'em, Squares, Margin, Confidence Pools, 33, and more. Run Your Pool hosts formats for NFL and college football with 1-week games, full season, playoffs, or the Super Bowl. Unlike other fantasy platforms, Run Your Pool has options and settings to make it your own. You can even brand your pool for your local business, bar, or restaurant. Reconnect with friends and join nearly 2 million football fans to make every game action-packed this season. Check them out today and get $10 off at runyourpool.com/lockedon or use your promo code LOCKEDON, not all capital letters, but all one word at checkout. Anywhere, everywhere in the world, Run Your Pool helps friends and colleagues compete. The NFL season starts on September 9th. Start today at runyourpool.com/lockedon and have your pool up and running in minutes. Runyourpool.com/lockedon. Game on. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're continuing rolling here. Remember, you can subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really helps us out. Let's keep it rolling real quick because we got to talk about Joe Haden. This was like a developing thing throughout the day. Like I pulled into the Steelers facility for practice. I'm sitting down with the other reporters, and then all of a sudden you get those Adam Schefter bombs that pop up on your Twitter account. And Adam Schefter tweeted the following. around, I'd say, like 11 o'clock or, in the morning, a little bit before noon. And he said, quote, after approaching the Steelers about an extension to finish his career in Pittsburgh, Pro Bowl cornerback Joe Haden has decided to play out his contract and test the free agent market in 2022 when the cap is expected to increase significantly, per his agent, Drew Rosenhaus. Then he said, and then a quote from Drew Rosenhaus, his agent, says, quote, Joe has never been an unrestricted free agent before and is excited about that opportunity, Rosenhaus said. We expect him to have a very strong market, end quote. So, obvious, message sent there. If you've been listening to this podcast or just following the Steelers, you know that Joe Haden, it was announced that he was looking to set up an extension to finish out his career with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And there was reasonable questions behind that because, again, he'll be 33 next year. But as I've been a guy that's talked about Joe Haden for a while, Joe Haden's not the kind of guy that's a speed corner that, man, like, oh, man, when he gets old, his speed's going to go and then he's never going to be able to play in the NFL again. That's not his style. He uses technique. He uses positioning. He uses leverage. He outsmarts opponents. He's always been a guy that, he doesn't need to have a 4.4 speed. If he can run with 4.6 speed, he's going to be able to compete, and he's maintained that. And I think that's why they're very confident about this year. But here's the thing, and this is why I often say, this is another situation where there's no bad guy here. There's no bad guy situation for Joe Haden and the Steelers. Joe Haden wants to get his money, feels like he can keep playing in the NFL, and that's great. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have every reason to say, nah, Joe, like we're about to pay TJ Watt big money, and we're about to pay Minka Fitzpatrick big money. And yes, we have all this cap space, but we can't commit to you long term if you're 33 years old and we're not sure how long that's going to be. We also have to figure out how our defense is going to be constructed. So it's a reasonable situation. And Joe Haden's like, you know what? Next year the salary cap is going to boom. So why not I just take my time and go explore and see who wants me for big money. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with the Steelers playing either. This is very reasonable on both parties' sides here. Now, again, I'll say this. There's a lot of value that comes with Joe Haden, even in his older age, because some people are like, oh, man, he can't be useful. Listen, this man's more than a cornerback. He's a leader. And I've said this for years. He's the guy that, when he's in the room, the cornerback room, he's in the center of the conversation. Everyone's talking to him. He's leading the jokes. He's kind of being the guy that everyone kind of looks up to. And that's still the case even with Cam Sutton on the rise and some younger guys like James Pierre, Justin Lane figuring their way into the defense. Joe Haden's still that guy in the cornerback room, and I think that's a good thing to have on the roster. But it's just one of those things where, you know what, you got Cam Sutton locked up next year. You got James Pierre. You got Justin Lane. You're hoping that Arthur Mollett can show you something. Maybe Antoine Brooks comes off of his injury settlement situation, and we hear something from him at some point. But point being, you got other options, and who knows? Maybe they draft a cornerback next year. Maybe they maybe they look at guys in free agency next year. Maybe Joe comes back next year. Maybe the market doesn't work out for him. However, it's going to be something that Joe wants to explore. Now, I did see this response, and I thought this was reasonable at first. I saw the consideration. Well, wait a minute. What if Drew Rosenhaus is just like stirring the pot here, just trying to make the Steelers, just trying to shake the tree and see if the Steelers, let out a few gold nuggets? Well, that kind of got put to bed. Either that or Joe Haden's along for the joke, or along for the ride here, because Joe Haden, not too long after that report from Adam Schefter, tweeted out just hashtag last dance, and it was like, well, there we go. That's all we needed to hear, because that's the message. So, and of course, referencing the Michael Jordan documentary in The Last Dance, his last year with the Chicago Bulls, when everyone knew that's what that was. He's saying, yeah, everyone knows what this is, but I don't think there's any resentment. There's not any sense of like, oh man, they dogged me out. It's just like, hey man, this isn't gonna work out, but you know what? I'm here to ride with my guys. This is the first team that ever got him to the playoffs, so he's excited to get that opportunity again with this group. But next year it's a business, and when you understand it's a business, you don't make things personal, and you keep it rolling moving forward. So interesting stuff with Joe Haden. We will keep an eye on that, and who steps up this year at cornerback, because that's the other big deal here, right? Now James Pierre, Justin Lane, Cam Sutton, you're all in a situation like, wait a second, we might be playing for a longer term deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers if Joe Haden can't be around that much longer. So A lot of things to consider here, but definitely some interesting developments there with Joe Haden and the Steelers secondary. We're going to take another quick break here. When we come back, I want to talk about the practice squad additions because we talked about the additions back to the team, offensive line, getting some reinforcements, Arthur Mullet coming back in the slot. But I want to talk more about this practice squad because there was a couple signings that we knew of, that we expected from guys in training camp, and then one signing that I thought was pretty interesting about how they added to their to their lineup. But we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll deal with that. First, I got to tell you guys about Bet Online. It's that time of the year again, and all eyes are now turning to football as teams are back on the gridiron to start the football season. As always, Bet Online is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. Get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including the $500,000 NFL Mega Contest and the $200,000 NFL Survivor Contest, open right now at Bet Online. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive 100% welcome bonus, and be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo. Make a bet on the Thursday, September 9th season opener between the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, from football, basketball, boxing, right down to horse racing. Don't wait and take advantage of all their great offers available for the 2021 season at betonline.ag, your online sportsbook experts. We're also brought to you by rockauto.com. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? For example, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $353 from a chain store, but it's only $216 if you get it at rockauto.com. Rock Auto is a family-owned business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are always reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could need, from brake parts to tail lamps to motor oil and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and you can see the parts available for your car or truck, and be sure to write Locked On in there "How did you hear us, Bucks?" to let them know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today and tell them that Locked On sent you. All right. And we know when I do back-to-back ad reads, we keep it rolling here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. So let's talk about some practice squad, because that was the big concern here, right? We were all interested in to see who the Steelers added on their practice squad. Well, they made 15 additions, which they're allowed 16, so that means that they have at least one more, and that's this at the time of the recording. There might be another addition that I already don't know about. But I look at this practice squad, and you got some obvious ones: Rico Bussey and Cody White, two wide receivers they really liked in training camp, but just you got a full wide receiver room. You got James Washington, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and Ray McLeod's your fifth option. That's tough. And Rico Bussey kind of cooled off, I'd say, to the end of camp. Cody White was injured at the beginning of camp. They really liked him, but they also added Steven Sims, I believe, from the Washington football team. He's there. So they got 3 receivers in training camp. They kept 2 running backs, 2 guys that you'll know, Trey Edmonds and Jalen Samuels. Again, guys who've been on the team the last couple years, but a full running back room. They kept 5 guys, and now we know that it's more like 4 guys because Anthony McFarland's on injured reserve, and that also explains that move a little bit more. But these are 2 veterans. They know the system. They know special teams. So if there's emergency situations, you promote them from the practice squad, and you deal with that then. They kept 3 offensive linemen: Chaz Green, John LeGlue, Malcolm Pridgeon. Guys they've had in camp. No surprise there. Kevin Rader was the lone tight end they kept. Makes sense if Zach Gentry or any of those guys go down. You want a third option to be promoted. Daniel Archibong, a defensive lineman that that comes with an interesting pedigree there. 2 linebackers, Derek Tuska and Christian Miller. If you're wondering about Quincy Roche, he was claimed off waivers by the New York Giants. So kind of like Tuzar Skipper the year before, the Giants picking at the reserve edge rusher the Steelers couldn't keep. I talked with Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants about that. Go check out her podcast for my full takes there, as far as how I see him fitting into their team. But here, Locked On Steelers, we focus on the Steelers. But it was the defensive backs that was the most interesting on the practice squad here. Now, this came from Karl Joseph, Mark Gilbert, and Donovan Steiner as your 3 signings. Now, Karl Joseph, obviously the big name there, right? Former first-round draft pick. Now, Mark Gilbert, Donovan Steiner, 2 guys that in camp turn some heads. We're like, oh, okay, who's this guy over here? I like him, but not enough to say buy like Trey Norwood or Miles Killebrew or of course Minka Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmonds. He had a really good interception, I believe, against the Eagles in the preseason. So some work there. Like, hey, if if an emergency situation happens, you'll be called up. Mark Gilbert, cornerback that I thought acquitted himself well, but Justin Lane came on strong towards the end there. James Pierre's been strong the whole time, and the rest of the cornerbacks, you're not getting rid of those guys. And also Mark Gilbert, not a slot guy, so not able to help there. So that's why he's there. But the big deal, Karl Joseph. Now, Karl Joseph, a bit of a bust of a draft pick for the Raiders because he was a 14th overall pick in the first round back in 2016. And, when you do that, you expect to get more than about 4 or 5 years, which is what they got out of him before he went to the Cleveland Browns. Then the Raiders signed him back after the Browns didn't keep him after the 2020 season. The Raiders brought him to training camp, and he didn't make the team, and he was cut on Tuesday. So the Steelers signed him Wednesday. And they're like, you know what, we'll bring him to the practice squad. But the fact that he cleared waivers like that, I think this says a lot. That maybe he has more work to do. But here's the thing: Karl Joseph, a West Virginia University product, a safety prospect who, you're like, hey, you know what? This guy's 27. He's been in the NFL. He knows the story. He started 9 games last year, started 8 games the year before that. He's had a season where he started 15 games. He knows the speed of the NFL. So if anyone goes down in the safety room, you'll be happy to promote him. And that's the thing, Donovan Steiner, now maybe you push, he's not the first guy you call up there because you got Karl Joseph. And maybe he's also emergency help in the slot if there's some injuries that happen there. So lots of things to consider. Overall, I think the Steelers made some smart practice squad adjustments. We will see how that works out. Now, the Steelers, their practice on Wednesday was the last of the week. Thursday through Sunday, they will have off. Nobody's at the facility. So all eyes will be turning to TJ Watt and when he will sign his extension. I'm fairly confident. Steelers fans, if you're still waiting for it, don't worry. Everyone is. But I'm fairly confident that will happen very soon. And he'll be back out practicing with the team in full, heading into week 1, ready to go. So that's all we have for you here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We will update you tomorrow to finish out the week on Friday's episode. Be sure to stay tuned for that. I'm Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe to us. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Odyssey, as well as YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Rate us 5 stars with a positive comment on Apple Podcasts, and you get a special shout out at the end of the show. Stay tuned tomorrow. It's going to be a fun show ending the week. We'll talk to you then.